Family Gaming Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to Engage, a family gaming podcast. This is episode 101 and I am your host, Stephen Dutzman. This is the official video game and board game podcast for EngageFamilyGaming.com. EFG is a website where parents like myself and all of my co-hosts come together to give parents and families the information they need to get their family game on. It's a very special episode. It's quiet. It's the calm after the storm. So obviously last week was a crazy celebration. But this week, I have a guest who many of you who listen to Gaming with the Moms will remember as Dr. Regina McMenomy. How are you, Regina?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
You have, I am honored to have you back after you were on for 4 straight episodes during our E3 coverage.
Right, yeah.
You bailed early.
I did.
Because you hated us. Also because it was much less of a deal for you to just randomly hop home on Thursday night, whereas we had to plan a whole day for travel.
Yeah. Which, by the way, my entire flight was all people from E3, like the whole thing.
Yeah?
Yeah. It was so funny.
That's interesting.
You were there, like, because they all had, like, the gear on and stuff still.
How many Mario visors did you see on that plane?
I think there were 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had one heading back to New Jersey. So it was an interesting experience, but it was fun. So I am still eternally grateful to you coming and helping keep me sane while we were there, because man, I think can we think back and recount the number of times that I almost lost my damn mind? It was a lot.
Yeah.
It was quite a few. But hey, what are you gonna do, right?
Yeah.
That's what you do when you go to. That's what you do when you go to the biggest convention you've ever been to and have to work. You know, you almost go insane and depend on your friends. So thank you very much for that. So, this week we're gonna talk about board games again. I know last week we had the professor on, and we had she who will not be named or does not need to be named. It's Kelly, but we like to make it sound something intense.
Special.
She just doesn't need a title, is really what it comes down to. A little different than the professor, who does need a nickname. So, but we're going to bring it down again. We're going to talk, that was a little bit of a retrospective, go back to the beginning, talking about board games. But, as I've said before, the topics kind of come to us right now because it's convention season. And most recently, there was Gen Con. The 50th anniversary of Gen Con. How crazy is that? Fun fact. Did you know that Gary Gygax started Gen Con?
I did not know that.
I didn't either, until I saw the little news post. It was super interesting. It was his like tactical gaming group that helped get everything started, and it was super interesting. It's been around for 50 freaking years. Although when it started, a little bit different than it is now. Because this time, they rented out Lucas Oil Stadium. Do you know what Lucas Oil Stadium is? Mm-mm. That's where the Indianapolis Colts play.
I was going to say football.
Yeah. Sports ball. I understand.
The sporting.
The
thing where the stuff happens.
But for those that don't know, that they rented out an NFL stadium to put their overflow onto the field.
Wow.
So that's where they had like their open gaming. It looks like they had like some Magic stuff going on, like tournaments, like the big stuff. I didn't see any booths. So they rented out. So normally it's in the Indianapolis Convention Center.
Right.
Which is a sprawling facility. That's why they use Indianapolis, because it's big. There's plenty of space. There's lots of, it's not a travel town, so it's not like they ever really conflict with everything. Lots of industry there. I mean, people travel there, but normally it's for work.
Right.
And it's the center of the country, so it's easy for everybody to come to. That's one of the reasons why they were hesitant to move when Indiana had their thing within the last couple of years.
Right.
Gen Con was like, all right, well, we're going to move. And then I know inside they were like, but we really hope this sorts itself out, because we really can't. Because I don't think Gen Con would be the same if it was in Seattle.
No.
Right? Like, it's just, there's something about it being in the heartland, right?
And yeah, there's something about that, and there's something about, Seattle already has its gaming convention.
Yeah.
and it's already got its culture. And not that not that Seattle wouldn't do well by Gen Con, but there's a lot that already happens there that's geek-centered. But this is like what Indianapolis has.
Also, they'd have to, absolutely. They'd have to schedule around things, whereas they're one of the biggest things that happens in Indiana.
Yeah.
And that's not an insult to Indiana, because Gen Con is freaking huge.
Right.
As proven by the fact that not only did they fill up that convention center,
right.
they had to rent Lucas Oil Stadium. So if you want, there's pictures on Twitter. You can look up at Charlie_Hall. You might have to dig back through his timeline, but he did take a picture of Lucas Oil Stadium. I actually retweeted him because it's just majestic. Just how, first off, it's a really nice stadium, but the fact that there was a board game convention on it,
right?
It actually made me really regret that I wasn't there this year, and I hope they rent it out again next year, because as a football fan, that facility means different things to me.
Right.
So it'd be super neat. So, so we thought that we would go through some of the interesting announcements that we saw there, or that we saw come out of there, and just kind of riff on some of that, because both Regina and I are we are board game aficionados.
Mm-hmm.
But before we do that, I think we should probably go around the horn. You have no games to play because you have been traveling nonstop for the last month because you're a college professor. So you needed to squeeze all that in before you have no free time for the next forever.
Yeah, and it's funny because I pack board games wherever I go. I'm always packing. That's what I tell my friends. Is my joke is like, even when we meet up at a bar or a restaurant, and everybody's like, "You got a game, Regina?" I'm like, "Of course I do," and I can whip out 3 games that are conveniently in my purse, which are usually Love Letter and 5 Crowns and maybe something else, whatever other fast card game is tickled my fancy at the time. But I'm always ready to go. So I was ready with games at all of these mini vacations that I took in the past few weeks, and didn't have the opportunity once to pull out a deck of anything.
Well, that's what happens when you're at the beach.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a fancy pants, because that's what you do. So I was not so lucky to be at the beach. Although lucky's not really the right word, because anyone that knows me knows I actually hate the beach. So I don't want the beach to be gone.
Right.
I'm happy that it exists.
Right, and you're happy it makes other people happy.
And I'm happy that it makes you happy. It's just not my jam. I have very fond memories of being very happy for my mom to enjoy going to the beach whenever she brought me and my brother and my sister to the beach. But I really didn't like it. Right. The only thing I liked about it was that feeling of getting home and getting changed back into real clothes. You know that feeling, right? That was my favorite part.
Yeah.
It didn't make it much worth it. But I digress. I played this new game. Yeah, it is Seikatsu. Seikatsu. Go figure on Twitter. IDW just retweeted The Thoughtful Gamer. Seikatsu review. A nice game. I want to say this is more than a nice game. It's a very good game, in fact. So here's how this game works. It's a tile-laying game, but you're not laying down tiles. You're laying down they're little circles. They're almost like poker chips. In fact, I saw this game when it was a prototype, and they were literally poker chips. On each chip is a bird of one of, I think, 5 different colors, a very Asian print theme.
Right.
And around it is a circle of a specific color of flowers: orange, blue, purple, different kinds of flowers. And here's how it works: you put the tile every turn. You have 2 tiles in your hand. You place one on the board, and then you draw another tile. Boom, that's it.
There's only 2, and you're only holding 2.
There's only 2, and you're holding 2.
5 or whatever.
Exactly, no.
Okay.
You have dose.
Okay.
You put one down, you immediately earn points for collecting, for the number of birds of the same color that are adjacent to each other, or orthogonally adjacent to each other. And that is, and you earn 1 point for every bird that's in the thing. So you start with 2, and then the next person could put down the same color bird, and they get 3, and then 4, and then it gets crazy.
Build off other people's plays.
You can you absolutely build off other people's things, but you can build off that the next turn if you just so happen to, and that tends to happen.
Huh. Okay.
But the game is organized into a series of rows from everyone's perspective. Basically, it's when it's a 3-player game, you each sit at this circular board at, basically you sit at the 3 different angles. There's little pagodas to indicate where you're supposed to sit.
Right.
And you each have a certain number of rows. And so it's like 4, 5, 6 slots, and then 7, and then 6, 5, 4. Okay. So everybody has the same number of rows. You earn points at the end of the game for the number of the different flowers that you have in a given row.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, if you can manage to get 6 of a given flower into a row, you get 20 points for it. But if you can only get 3 of a given flower type, then you only get 6 points. So it's like you want to, and you score that for each row, and it's dependent upon the perspective. So I would be going this way, and my mom would be coming at it from a different angle. And so, like, you have to be careful to earn yourself points without accidentally giving your opponents more.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and eventually you fill up the entire board.
Right.
There are enough tiles, so every slot is filled.
So it's like thorough that way, where...
Very similar. Yeah. It's very similar to that. The difference is there's no player elimination because you're scoring points. My 8-year-old played this game. Not super well, but he was able to play it and understand it.
Right.
There's some area denial stuff. There's some shenanigans that you can pull. I would expect that if there were like a Saikatsu tournament, that some nerds would really break this down with like the math and optimal placement and things like that. But from a casual game perspective, we sat and we played several games. We're able to have conversations while we were playing. It was very simple. It's also absolutely stunningly beautiful as you go. The board is like this very painterly, very like a Japanese theme, So I can't... we're going to have a review up on the site soon. And we're going to have some pictures and probably some video as well. This is probably one of the prettiest board games I've played all year. And I actually think that it might be one of the best board games I've played all year.
Nice.
I haven't really sat down and put them in order.
Yeah.
But this is a game I absolutely would recommend to anyone. Because anyone can play it. It is absolutely gorgeous. It is available now. I think it's actually available now. Let's head on over to the Amazon, shall we?
Yeah, I was just going to look, actually, to see.
I got it.
All right.
It would help if I actually was typing in the appropriate field. So, Saikatsu is $40 on Amazon right now. It is worth every penny of that. I mean, if you want to, it comes out October 25th, actually, so it's not out yet. Still got a couple of months. We have an early release copy.
Pre-order.
As is our, but yes, here's what I'm saying, folks. Pre-order the hell out of this.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you are having trouble getting your new games to the table, there's no reason not to put this one on the pile. I think this would also make a great gift. I mean, obviously, as scary as it is, Regina, we're getting towards that time of year, especially if this is coming out the end of October.
I know. I can thinking about it.
Exactly. I can guarantee, and it's easy for me to guarantee because I write it, but I guarantee you that this will be on our holiday gift list recommendations. Just by nature of the fact that you could give this game to anyone that is even tangentially interested in board games. So that is Saikatsu.
Right.
From IDW Games.
I'm always looking for those short games because we have a lot of the more meaty games, the things that take a couple hours to play, that take a lot for setup. And I really like games that have simple mechanics that are easy but complex. I don't know how to define that in a better way. But it's easy to learn. You have 2 tiles. You play, you draw. You play, you draw. Like that.
Complexity and depth are not always connected.
Exactly.
So I agree with you. I love games that you can play quickly. I love games that you can play casually.
I do too.
That aren't, you must pay attention to this game and only this game. You can only play Twilight Imperium as often, every so often.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Twilight Imperium is a 7-hour board game that requires you to pay attention to it in its entirety. That is a job. This is a fun little treat. So I'm throwing that out there. Yeah. The other game that I wanted to talk about is I want to talk about Mousetrap. Can we talk about Mousetrap?
Mousetrap, yes, we can talk about.
You remember this is so.
I do.
Everybody who's like, OMG, gotta be with the hip new Euro games.
Right.
Why would we be talking about a mass market pile of plastic? Well, I'm going to tell you what. I think everyone should go to our Instagram and take a look at the video and witness, like, the glee of my daughter making that stupid Rube Goldberg Mousetrap thing go. Because it's a dumb game. I mean, come on, it's not gonna win the Spiel des Jahres. It wouldn't have won the Spiel des Jahres when it came out in the 80s.
Right.
But it is super cool. It's bright colors. Hasbro has a new version of it coming out later on this year that is kind of being packaged along with essentially like this Mensa for Kids collection. I'm not sure exactly why it fits into that. But whatever. It's a cool game.
Right.
Building it is a puzzle, basically. I mean, it's not really, but I mean, it's having the kids put it together was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We played it this afternoon because it just came today, and we played it before I recorded. And this is like, believe it or not, this is like a holy grail game for me when I was a kid. Like, I desperately wanted Mousetrap, but it was never around when we could afford it, and
Yep.
So now I finally have my own copy, and I am thrilled. So there will be lots of cool gameplay videos and pictures and stuff of these games coming up. And it's certainly a nice looking box, just the way they put everything together for the new Mensa packaging. But I think we're going to be recommending Perfection more, just by nature of the fact that Perfection is really, really freaking cool. You remember that one with the...
I love Perfection.
That does not... Game. Can I say that doesn't surprise me at all?
It was
That's like me saying I love bacon.
Right.
Anybody that knows just knows that that's a thing.
I just remember the satisfaction of playing it and winning it on occasion. Yeah, I haven't played it in forever. Just hearing about it.
So how did you deal with the pieces to make sure that they weren't like... Because obviously you can't... Did you pick them up and shake them?
I think that's what we did. Yeah, I remember keeping a Ziploc bag that we kept them in, and someone would hold them in the bag and shake it with their hands around it.
All right.
So you couldn't see what you were, and then they would grab that way.
All right.
Yeah.
So my kids were playing co-op for a little bit, which I actually think is kind of interesting.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
So I think that's what's interesting about this is that it is a toy more than it is a game, right? Because it's not like you're taking turns or whatever. But there's something about there's something about it. The best part is I didn't tell my 8-year-old played it first. I didn't tell him what happened when the timer went off. I just said, yeah. I'm going to set this time. I'm timing you. Just keep going. And then the timer went off because you only get a minute, right? Yeah. And it just popped right up at him. And the Perfection is... he was a little... He looked at me like, I hate you, Dad. So this version is a little chunkier than the versions that I remember. It's probably about 3 inches tall. Uh-huh. So it's like this deep well that you're putting stuff in. So when that spring unloads...
Snaps, yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. And I know we spend a lot of time on here, and on most board game podcasts, right? Like they talk about like the new hotness and some of the older stuff. I wanted to give a little bit of love to some of these Hasbro games, not just because I'm going to HasCon in a couple weeks. That's a little bit of a spoiler. Not just because of that, but because sometimes we're not talking about like vanilla Monopoly.
Yeah.
That's crazy talk. Yeah. But these are fine.
We've talked about that on Gaming with the Moms, and I'm like, I don't think Monopoly should even be considered a board game.
Okay, I think that, it technically is.
It's a let's destroy your family game.
Oh, well but see, the let's destroy your family thing, that has more to do with the fact that you are very competitive.
I don't know what you're
learned this. I've learned this. Hashtag Steve is bad at video games. Hashtag Regina gets angry about games. So I get that, but it is a game. It may not be a good one.
Yeah.
It's objectively bad. If I may recommend, the Mario version is actually much better.
Yeah, and I think you told me the Lord of the Rings one as well.
Yep.
Was it where
the Lord of the Rings one, that one's way out of print, so it's probably super expensive.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
You could do that with any version of Monopoly, though.
Right.
All you have to do is just mark one of the ones
Right.
in some way
Right.
on your regular old Monopoly dice. Just get a little Sharpie and color in the pip or
Right.
whatever, and then just have another pawn that goes
Right.
around. Just take one of your kids' Shopkins or something.
Yeah.
And bam,
Yeah.
you have Lord of the Rings Monopoly.
Yeah.
I am absolutely going to have an extra dice added to our Mario thing just so we can have that.
You can do that if you want to, yeah.
Yeah. So, and we're going to have a thing, folks, by the way, probably towards the end of the year, we're going to be talking about ways that you can kind of doctor up some of these family classics as a way to kind of bring them up to the new age. Because there's a couple of ways that you can take these piles of cardboard and actually make them a little bit more useful. So that is Around the Horn. Again, Regina hates games right now because she's too busy spending time at the beach and traveling for the eclipse. Did you enjoy traveling for the eclipse? Did you actually get to see it?
Yes.
Did you look at the sun without the glasses on, like some
when
people?
it was in totality, I did.
Yeah.
I didn't look at it when it was still blinding, but yes, and I took my my toddler daughter, and she learned to wear the glasses, and she looked at the sun during all the phases, and then we got to check out the whole thing when we were standing on the edge of a canyon, looking out over Mount Jefferson, which is part of the Eastern Oregon landscape. And the sun was remarkable, of course, but the two things that I knew the shadow was going to happen, so where we were standing, you could watch the shadow fall across the landscape and approach where we were standing. That was really cool. The thing that I didn't anticipate about a complete totality is how cold it is.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like how cold I got goosebumps. Like the temperature dropped so significantly that we were all like, wow, I wish I had my coat. And it was slow, but then once the sun was completely dark, and it was dark for 2 minutes where we were, it was cold. And I kind of thought, oh, it's going to feel like sunset, right? Because that's pretty much just what's happening. It's kind of the same effect. The thing is, sunset's on one side of your purview, so when you're standing somewhere and it's sunset 360 degrees around you, is something you never see, obviously, because that's not the way the sun works.
Yeah, the next one is in 2024, and one of the places in its path happens to be Burlington, Vermont, where my brother lives.
Oh, very nice.
So I will be going to visit him. Now, I'll bet that it's going to be freaking cold because it's going to be April in Burlington, Vermont. But I'm going to go see it. I bet you there's going to be some cool stuff, like maybe up on a ski slope or something.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to investigate.
Yeah,
yeah.
If it's anything like this was, I stayed on a private ranch that somebody literally just rented out for people to camp. They provided food. We spent $50, and they gave us 5 meals for $50, and they were pulled pork and tri-tip steak and eggs and sausage. This wasn't
I'm angry.
Yeah.
How come you didn't tell me? I would have come.
Well, I figured another West Coast trip was probably not in your budget. This was,
probably
a couple
not.
Of hours
probably
drive.
not.
And Madras, the town we were in, is in the middle of nowhere. You would have had to flown and driven. Now the traffic leaving, it was all apocalyptic here. It's going to be the end of the world for traffic, and literally the highway was at a standstill when we went to leave, and that was at the end of the day because we waited. And so we drove essentially about 15 miles further east than we would need to, so we could catch a different highway and head north and not hit as much traffic. So it actually ended up not being as bad, but it was impressive. I took some pictures of the traffic just to show people what it was like, because it was once everybody left town, it was just a standstill. So.
Well, I saw the stuff on Facebook that I think you had shared something with somebody, or someone shared it with you. I don't know, and I was like, ooh. I had some friends who actually went down to Tennessee.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, I had friends out there too.
One of them was a science teacher from Brooklyn, actually. Brooklyn or Manhattan, one of those. And she went down. Another one's a science teacher in Connecticut. She's actually going to get her Ph.D. in astronomy.
Nice.
So this was she had to see it.
Yeah. Well, there were camps that were all NASA engineers that had just come out to watch, because Madras was supposed to be the best place to watch in the U.S. because it's desert and it was going to be dry. There were some wildfires not far away, and so there was a bit of a haze the morning of. but it still didn't, really affect what we could see. And they had a whole solar fest where you could go, and the NASA engineers were giving lectures, and you could go in and you could listen to them talking about, science and all that kind of stuff. So it was really cool. It was definitely a very cool experience. I'm sure they'll be doing similar things for 2024, which we're already planning to figure out where we're going to go to watch it now.
Hey, if you want to come out to Vermont,
I might take you up on that. It would be awesome.
I'm sure my brother will not. I'm sure my brother will not mind.
Yeah.
So that is our shenanigans. Why don't we take a break?
Right. Okay.
And then we'll come back and then we'll talk about Gen Con.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Engage, a family gaming podcast. I am still Steven. I am still your host. There has been no mutiny today. I'm still joined by the good doctor, Dr. Regina McMenomy. We are still talking about board games. Regina, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Did you know that 1 in 4 people in America deals with a mental health issue?
I did know that.
You did. Probably because you're a doctor and you're
Kind
smarter
of.
than me.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know about that last part, but I have actually done a little bit of research on games and mental health. We had someone on the podcast a couple years ago who was doing that as her master's research.
Well, that is super impressive. I did not know that. I didn't know that you did that. Was that when you were doing Game On Girl?
That
or
was
that
Game On Girl, yeah.
All right. You guys did such cool stuff.
We did.
So,
yeah.
So 1 in 4. That, for those listening, that's 25% of the population. Hashtag Steve can do math. Talking about mental health symptoms is the fastest way to find hope and healing. But unfortunately, the stigma of mental health issues makes a lot of people feel like they have to suffer in silence. Take This, which is an organization that Engage Family Gaming proudly supports. They're an organization that is there to help by letting people know that it's okay to not be okay and that help is available. You can visit takethis.org for stories from people like you or me or anyone else. They have advice from mental health care experts and tips that for how to help people you love who might be struggling. It's a great organization. They actually do the AFK room at PAX. They had one at E3. Did you know there was one at E3? I didn't know where it was, but it was there.
I remember seeing mention of it, but I never found it, no.
Yeah, I never found it, but it was there. So they are run... those of you who listen to the podcast regularly know that one of the people who run that is one Susan Arndt and her husband Russ Pitts, and a few other noteworthy games folks, but it's not all about games. For them, it's actually all about mental health and trying to help people find help and know that you don't have to suffer quietly. So if you are one of those people, or if you know someone who is, lean on them for a little bit. They are there to support you. And if you're wondering where Take This comes from, just remember this. Take This. It is dangerous to go alone. So that's a little live read that I'll be doing when I come back from break every week, folks. So get used to it, because I'll be talking about takethis.org. Donate to them.
Yes.
Yay.
Yay.
Because they do great work. I don't think I can make it through a PAX without a AFK room. Man, let me tell you, I could have used the AFK room a couple times while I was at E3. I had to go make my own. Fortunately, they taught me all about how they work because I went to one. So, so let's talk about Gen Con, now that we've gotten the business stuff out of the way. So, Gen Con, huge announcements all over the place. Everybody was coming up with stuff. You and I had a little pre-production meeting before the show where we went over some of them, but I have some other ones that are worth talking about. Some of them are more interesting than important. The one that I was the most excited about, that has nothing to do with this show, is I got really excited about the Twilight Imperium 4th edition. Twilight Imperium is a almost 8-hour board game about space combat, so it's like literally the opposite of what my wife wants in this house, because as anyone who listens to this podcast knows, she hates space stuff. And Twilight Imperium is literally the definition of space stuff. However, now that they're printing a 4th edition, Daddy must have it. I think I'm going to have to do this. So if anyone wants to support me in my quest, if I might recommend, head on over to engagefamilygaming.com/community and shout at my wife and tell her that it is okay for me to have Twilight Imperium 4th Edition. It would mean a lot to me. So that's that. I think the coolest announcement was that new Fireball Island. How about that? Did you see that?
I did see that.
So, no one on this show should be any stranger to Rob Daviau. He's actually going to be on the show in the next handful of weeks to talk about all this before their Kickstarter. But he owns a company called Restoration Games, which is actually really neat. It's a company. Have you heard of Restoration Games, Regina?
I have, yes.
All right.
I have.
So, Restoration Games, for whoever is listening, is a board game development company that finds lost treasures, games that came out maybe before they should have, when technology wasn't great, when game design wasn't what it is today, and it gives them a new lease on life, really. Right now, their most recent actual release is a game called Stop Thief, which came out in the 80s with like a battery-operated like handset phone, whereas now it has an app.
Right.
So using that as like an example, it's one of those things where it's like, I think that's a pretty good adaptation. Makes it cheaper to produce. Yep. Cheaper to send out. Obviously, they modernized it. They have 4. This will be their 4th game. They also have Indulgence, which is a restoration of the 1981 classic Dragon Master. So in some of these cases, they buy the rights and then they just completely reskin them.
Right.
So next is Downforce, which is a 1979 racing game that was created by Dr. Robert Doyle, that was restored by Rob Daviau, and Stop Thief, which was originally designed by Wolfgang Kramer, who, to my understanding, is a very famous board game designer from back in the day. But now they got a new one. Now, their whole goal is to find all these old games, stuff that they can buy the license to relatively cheap, and just make it that much better. And they do a great job of it, but they're taking a crack at Fireball Island.
Right.
Do you remember Fireball Island, Regina?
I have vague memories. I don't think I played it. I think it was one of those that we never quite were able to get to work right because the mechanics never panned out the way they were supposed to. Or copy, or a friend had to use copy, etc., etc. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I played it once with a friend. This was a roll and move with some cards and whatever. The cool part was that the board was a island that had these channels, and marbles would spit out of the volcano's mouth and roll down the channels, and if you happened to be standing on it and knocked you over, oops, then you had to start over. And so they have purchased it, and they are re-releasing it and restoring it under the name Fireball Island, The Curse of Volcar. Volcar is the name of the volcano.
Right.
In case anyone was curious. I was curious, so I had to look it up because I had no idea. So it's not just called Fireball Island. This is really freaking cool. It was not playable. It's just a bunch of concept art. There is a Kickstarter that is coming later on this year. Because that's how they're going to do it. They're going to kickstart these games. This game is obviously going to be backed. I'm not even... I mean, come on. Because it's just Fireball Island. But basically... they are, the big thing is that the guy behind Game Trays, which is the same company that did the insert for Mechs and Minions, which is the League of Legends board game, which has an amazing insert, if you've never actually used it, is helping create this because the insert is also going to double as the game board, which is... super neat.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see this in action. Like I said, we're going to have Rob on the show in the next couple of weeks so he can talk about restoration games in general. Maybe I can convince him to send me some of these.
Yeah, do it.
And then, we're going to talk a little bit about Fireball Island and why he picked this one. Now, I know why he picked it, because it's awesome. But he doesn't do anything just because it's awesome. He's always, this man is always thinking. Thinking. So that is the first big announcement. You can go over to restorationgames.com. You can sign up for a mailing list so you get notified when the Kickstarter goes live. Or if you don't want to do that, just wait because I will tweet it out immediately, probably because I'll back it. Because I want this game, because I really want the stretch goals and the exclusives on this one, because this is going to be wacky.
Right, yeah. It's going to be fun.
So that is Fireball Island. Big fan of that. Super cool. Another interesting announcement. And this is not so much of a board game, as it is a tabletop role-playing game. They are republishing the original 1987 Star Wars role-playing game, like the original source book that some people, if you read, there's an article on Polygon where they talk about where some people actually credit this role-playing game for keeping Star Wars alive for a few years after the movies came out.
Right.
Because the movies themselves, obviously, they stopped in the late 80s.
Right.
And no one knew if they were going to do anything ever again.
Right.
They might not have,
Just
really.
kept the stories alive and the characters alive. Yep.
So I think that's kind of neat. Have you ever? Well, I mean, you haven't, because your first role playing game is the Pathfinder game that you're playing on the Geek Embassy.
That is true.
So I have never played this because, as anyone knows, I became a Star Wars fan in 2015. So I did not play it, but I think I might be grabbing the source book just because I am curious.
Yeah.
Because it's a different rule set than, say, Pathfinder or Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.
Yeah.
It is coming out later on this year.
Cool.
It's going to be $60. That's the only thing that gives me pause. $60 for a RPG source book is a little bit much. But I think that it's going to be like a collector's edition, so I think I kind of almost have to.
It's super
It is pretty.
And there's something to that, because a lot of the handbooks are just like so clearly thrown together and not well organized, and this has good artwork and stands, and it's Star Wars, and some of us are sucker for Star Wars.
You know what? There's 2 books in here.
There are 2 books in here. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was just one.
It's a source book and the role playing game. So you have like the
never mind.
You have the material for the background for the stories necessary, and then
all right. I stand corrected. So Star Wars fans, don't at me. I get it. $60 is a steal for a pair of books, especially in like a collector's edition. I'm doing the hashtag chef kiss. $60 is great. I learned about that on the Twitter.
Did you learn
about
that
that chef
on the
kiss
Twitter?
thing?
Keep it current.
Yeah. $60 is a great price for a pair of source books, especially a collector's edition set. You can pre-order it on the Fantasy Flight Games. So, I mean, if you've been itching for a little bit of role-playing action, or maybe your family plays together, and Star Wars is your jam, there have been other Star Wars role-playing games, but this is like the original, so it might be worth looking at, even if it's for a couple of one-shots, right? For where you're just going to do one evening every couple of months.
One short story,
Exactly.
Yeah, short adventure.
Exactly. These would be perfect, even if you're not going to do a full campaign. Like, do a one-shot, have it around. I think this is a absolute great addition for tabletop role players. If you don't play tabletop role-playing games, maybe skip it.
Yeah.
But
what do you think, Steve, about doing the Geek Embassy plays the Star Wars role-playing game?
I think you have to.
Would you participate in that?
I've already told you
I know.
that I want in on all of your Geek Embassy plays, because how about this, people? Listen to this. Regina has known me for almost more than a year now.
Yep.
A little bit more than a year. So clearly we're BFFs.
Clearly.
She knows that I am a giant nerd. She's my Facebook friend, so she's seen pictures of me in the woods.
LARPing, yeah.
Dressed up like an elf.
Yeah.
And she puts together this ragtag band of role players. No disrespect to them, but it's a ragtag band. And somehow that ragtag band of role players doesn't involve me. Now, she mentioned that it's because they play at 9 o'clock their time, which is midnight mine.
Yes. That is
I
true.
say to you, forget that noise. I am in 100%.
All right.
Because even if it means one night a week or every other week, I mean, how long do you guys play? 3 hours?
Yeah, about that. Usually we try to do 2 to 3, depending on what we did. The last time we did one episode that went an hour and a half, so we just were able to record that one. But
so I would have a hard stop at 3 a.m.
Well, the
But-
thing is that Evan right now, who's DMing for us, he's in Ohio, so he is also in the Eastern time zone. So
Okay, so
Yeah.
I would have a
You
slight
can-
hard stop.
yeah,
But what I would do is I would go to bed early,
right.
and then I would just wake up.
Yeah,
That's what I would do.
yeah.
Because I'm not crazy. I could go to bed at 9:30
Right, and get up.
and then get up
Right.
for a couple hours, come
Right.
down.
Yeah.
I
do your
mean,
thing. All right.
Yeah, so number
You're in
one,
the
yes,
next one.
absolutely, I am
We're
in.
going to continue. We've already discussed the fact that we're going to do another campaign where we're actually recording what will probably be the finale of this campaign tomorrow.
Okay.
And that's going to come out next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I think next week.
So
on our next
and
one,
yeah,
you'll be in.
I'm in.
But
I'm in.
But I'm putting
I have
this
to
on
be.
our docket of things that we're going to consider doing.
I think it's worth at least thinking about. I would probably need to buy the book, so
Yeah.
let me find out whether or not I actually buy the book.
Yeah, I mean it's not out yet, so we don't have to rush into it at any point. I'm just thinking it would be a really fun thing to do for that, because for me, I think in this campaign I played a dwarf barbarian, which was fun, but was wholly out of character for me. And I think I'd like to step back and do something that might be a little bit more comfortable the next time we do it. So.
Fair enough.
We'll see.
I fully intend to play a dwarf barbarian cleric. I'm gonna do it. Because I want to be a healer, but I also
Right.
want to hit things.
Right.
It's like a meme, right? When you want to be. So anyway,
Right.
those of you listening,
Anyway,
super duper inside baseball. But
Yes.
any episode of the Geek Embassy Plays that I am on, I will also be broadcasting across our channel,
Right.
so you can
Right on.
listen. Regina doesn't know that yet. This isn't
that's
really
all right.
much negotiation, but
No, that's cool.
I'm gonna do it.
I support
Hashtag I'll just take the files. I'll hold my file hostage. So that's a Star Wars role playing game. I think that's super rad. It's got Luke Skywalker on the front.
Yeah.
If nothing else, this is gonna look cool at your local Barnes and Noble.
Yes.
You know, definitely take a look at it.
Yep.
It'll be up on Amazon too. Fantasy Flight's really good about that. So you're not gonna struggle to find it. Maybe right away, because I think Star
Right.
Wars nerds are gonna buy the
It's gonna be-
crap out of
yeah.
that thing, but you'll get
Yep.
it.
It's going to be a hot commodity when it's
So,
dropped.
some other, speaking of Star Wars,
Yes.
let's talk about Star Wars Legion, because I think this actually has the potential to be one of the cooler announcements to come out of this, just by, excuse me, just by nature of the fact that I think this game is going to have like the longest tail of just about any game that was announced here. Because Star Wars Legion is a paint-and-play miniatures war game set in the Star Wars universe. So for people that don't know what I mean by that, I'm talking like Warhammer
Right.
and War Machines and things like that. And there has not been one of these in the Star Wars universe. Which has its ups and downs. I actually went, after the announcement, I went and talked to a buddy of mine named JP, who plays War Machine, and asked him, like, hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah, right.
Tell me what your opinion is on his take. Because he's $1,000 deep in War Machines and Warhammer.
Only?
He says that 1,000 is a lot.
I don't know.
Okay, 1,000 is
I
what he
married
has
one
on
of these
him.
guys, right?
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so 1,000 is the. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But that makes sense.
Yeah.
1,000 is what he has on hand. I think he's sold a bunch more.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what he has on him.
Yeah. 1,000 is a decent collection.
Yeah.
But,
Needless to say, this is an expensive hobby.
Yeah, it is a very expensive hobby.
so
It's
that's
a
the
very
first-
time-consuming hobby too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does your husband paint them,
Yes.
or does he? All right, he does.
And he's very talented at it too. Like very
Oh.
detailed, the whole thing. Yeah.
All right, well, maybe it, yeah. So,
Yep.
the reason I'm getting into it, because I am getting into it, is, at least slightly, is because Jenna has mentioned that she wants to paint she wants some miniatures to paint,
Oh,
and I just
nice.
haven't found a game that I care about.
Right.
But this looks like I'm down.
Yeah.
Like I think this is it.
Yeah.
Now he said that this is his. He had like a bunch. He said that it has a bunch of ups and downs. He thinks one thing is, this hobby is not casual.
No.
But because
No.
it's Star Wars, he thinks that some people might get into it and get kind of
can
in over
see
their
that.
head. because Star Wars draws a casual audience. You know, a dad and his kids, mom
Right.
and her kids. You
Right.
know, Star Wars fans that have your. Now he thinks that could be a turnoff for some people. They might get it and realize that it is a full game, but it's not if you think you need to catch them all.
Right.
Like this is the Pokemon mentality is strong with a lot of these folks.
Right.
So
No,
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I
First
think
off.
it's more like a skill tree game, right? Like you have all these different armies with different abilities, and you need to pick your skill tree and stick with it. Your army, and you stick with it. So stick with whoever you're going to play and play those. And you don't want to try to do everything because, like you said, that's going to break the bank.
Yeah.
And it also, from my experience trying to learn War Machine,
Okay.
it had, I don't know, I haven't played it in a few years. I played maybe half a dozen games. It has a high learning curve. It's not something you step into, like where I was saying I appreciate the games like Sakatsu that you were talking about at the start of the show, where you have one basic mechanic with some complexity and depth around it. That's not what this is. There's complexity and depth upon like layers upon layers upon layers in these kinds of games. So they do definitely take a lot of time and energy to get into enjoying. I think the fandom will appreciate it. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
So that was his first thought.
Yeah.
And I think you let's take one of those work surveys. So would you say you somewhat agree?
I somewhat agree that it's going to be.
You somewhat agree.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, it could be one of those things where people get really into it because it's complex. You never know how that's going to go.
Yeah.
So.
Well, there is a subset of Warhammer fans that have maybe been hanging on to Warhammer just because they want.
That could be that too. Yeah.
Or some people that are predisposed to like Warhammer but just don't like the Warhammer aesthetic, but then they see Darth Vader and they're like, I am in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It could be. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Yeah.
It could totally push people over the edge.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just be real. Like, I have not played one of these games.
Yeah.
But if they put out a Final Fantasy miniatures war game, I guess I'm in. I guess I gotta do it, right? Like, could I not? Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you don't play collectible card games, but then they made a Final Fantasy one. It's like, well, you have to. I have to. Right. I mean, I don't have a choice.
Right.
So, and Star Wars is that thing for multiple
for
generations of people at this point.
Yeah.
So that was his first point. I agree with you. I may somewhat agree with him on that. I think that it has the potential. This is one of those things where it's up to people to do their homework.
Right.
Now, he did say another thing is they're all unpainted miniatures, by the way.
Right.
It's worth pointing out. So he thought that, speaking of the unpainted miniatures, he thought that might also bring some people in, but not the same way that they do necessarily with Warhammer and War Machine, because one of the things with Warhammer and War Machine is like the kit bashing and the custom paint jobs. Nobody's gonna do. He thinks that there are not very many people that are gonna do like Hello Kitty Lord Vader, or Darth Vader rather, right? Whereas Hello Kitty War Machines are a legit thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like people doing
Chris make one of them. I made him do pink and green one time. I'm like, you have to do something different with this.
Yeah. Right. Because there's something to be said. Like there's not really quote unquote authentic. You know, like you don't have like the accuracy is not the same.
Right.
Whereas,
I mean, you could there is something to be said on the table that all your guys match and all your squadrons or all your groups kind of, because the factions, at least in War Machine, have specific colors associated with them.
Oh,
so
they do.
A lot of
Okay.
them will paint their minis those colors. Chris was never that guy, but there are a lot who do kind of stick to that kind of traditional canon for it.
So, I mean, I would probably be that same guy. So he said that might be a concern because there would be some folks that would be really torn by nature of the fact that this is freaking Star Wars. There's one thing to like tear apart the Warhammer canon, but like Star Wars canon is almost literally canon.
Yeah.
You know, like for some people, Star Wars is sacred.
Yes.
So there might be some concerns there.
Right.
And then the other piece, so he thought about that thing where it might take away some people might be a little set back from
Right.
the normal customization thing. So what do you think on that? Do you agree, disagree? Or do you think that's inconsequential? I think that's like whatever. People
I
can
think it
paint their
doesn't really
minis however
matter.
they want.
I think it doesn't really matter. I think it will matter more about how the communities form around the game.
Yeah.
If you have a community that forms around the game that says, I would love a Hello Kitty Darth Vader, then that will happen. And if you have one where you're, socially shunned if your minis aren't painted in, appropriate Death Star, uniform colors, and people are like, hey, what are you doing to that? Then you won't do it. And so a lot of that depends on the community that you fall into. And I have a feeling, like you said, because Star Wars tends to have more kind of parents with their kids gravitate toward it, I think that you'll see I hope that you'll see a more open community. And, the people who are the purists will always be able to find each other. That's kind of the nature of that thing. They'll form their own groups, and they won't have casual people who have, pink or orange or whatever colors you want in your thing. So
Fair enough.
yeah.
All right. So those were some of his thoughts.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna
interesting.
have to see how it works.
Yeah, I would love to see how, if that does happen, the way people do have their own interpretations. I think that would be really fun. But I love mashups, and I love things that turn canon on its head because I just think it's fun, and I'm not a purist. So
Generally, I am not either.
Yeah.
I'm totally fine with that stuff.
Yeah.
So another couple announcements. So that's Star Wars Legions,
Right.
And that's cool. Next thing, and we're gonna save the biggest one, I think, for last. But the next one is one that I didn't tell you about. What do you think about a new Civilization board game? Civilization, A New Age, or A New Dawn, rather.
huh.
Civilization, A New Dawn.
I don't know. Well, I mean, I like I've only looked at the book, the playbook, and the board for the other Civilization game.
All right.
So I have never played it, so I don't know how it would play, but I'd be interested.
So this is a new game. It's coming out Q4 of this year from Fantasy Flight. They tend to just be doing a lot of licenses and putting out chunky games based on those. They have a Fallout game coming out very
I saw
soon.
the Fallout one, yeah.
Yeah, a little outside of our genre, but I'm excited about that one just because I think it might be interesting. I'm hoping they do a Elder Scrolls one. I will buy that in a second.
Right.
So Civilization: A New Dawn is a New Dawn is, I think in this case, somewhat literal in that they are kind of trying to make kind of take modern board game design principles and create almost like. They can't make a Euro game because one of the X's is exterminate, and
Right.
Euro games don't have a lot of conflict by nature, but
Right.
it is a deeper strategy game. One of the areas that they really focused on simplifying things was in combat. Combat is, rather than putting miniatures and moving them around the board, it is very it's card driven. They tried to really streamline the combat as much as possible. And this game is built around the construction of wonders, which, if you play Civilization, is not necessarily the primary, like, it's a thing, and some of them are important for different strategies,
Right.
but it's not the entire game. This is, making wonders is one of the biggest and most important things. So,
Interesting.
and also technologies. They really try to simulate the tech tree as much as they
Right.
can.
Those
There's
are
some
my
good
favorite
demos
ways to
on
play
it.
Civ, so.
Yeah. No, me too. So, yeah, I mean, the demos that I have read about from Gen Con were they all sound pretty good.
Yeah.
So people were pretty happy with it. It was thumbs up or thumbs down with the combat. Some people were like, man, I don't like
This is
simplified
really-
combat. I'm fine with it.
Right.
I don't need miniatures in every game that beat each other up in every game I play. Thank you very much.
Right.
And what's interesting is the game board is always random by nature of the fact that it's a series of hex grids, and during gameplay setup, you shuffle them up, put them all down, so the game board is always different, which,
Cool.
hella Civilization. So we'll be
Yeah.
looking at that. That is not a cheap game.
Yep.
In fact,
They
I don't even
never
know if
are.
it has. It's going to be, well, it's $50, so it's not.
It's not bad.
It's not Twilight Imperium, but it's
Right.
not, it's not a filler game either. This is also a game that's probably going to take a whole evening. This is not a short game either. But I mean, you're playing a game called Civilization. If you think that it's going to be short, don't play the PC game. Tell you what, me and Regina could play a game of that multiplayer, and it could take all weekend, literally.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it takes forever.
Especially if we didn't fight each other, it could just take forever.
Yeah.
Or even worse, if we only fought each other a little bit.
Right. On occasion.
So that is Sid Meier's Civilization's A New Dawn. Now, let's get down to the real thing, and this is gonna be a big deal. We talked about this a little bit on the last podcast because we did some dream mashups for what we would like about this, and that is Stuffed Fables. And there actually has been a bit of an update, literally, that happened while we were on Twitter prepping for the show. Stuffed Fables is an adventure book game. It was called a storyboard game, but they changed it to an adventure book game, possibly because they realized there might be a legal challenge to that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So Stuffed Fables is an adventure book game, and it is a miniature game that is essentially what would happen if it is. I'm trying to describe this as basically like a sword and sorcery version of Inside Out.
Cool.
What do you think?
I think that'd be awesome.
So basically, this is
amazing.
A story. Yeah, I mean, the miniatures are awesome.
Yeah.
So the general gist is a little girl's moving from her crib into a big girl bed. Both Regina and I know those feels.
Mm-hmm.
And she no longer has her magical crib to protect her from the forces of evil.
Yep.
So who is going to stand in the way of the forces of evil? Well, of course, her stuffed animals.
Yes.
And they take up arms against the forces of evil, and it's super adorable. What's super interesting about this is a miniatures dungeon crawl game a la Mice and Mystics, a la Myth, a la any number of other games. But instead of a game board, you have a book.
Right.
One page has the game board with the grid and the various shenanigans, and the other side is all the rules text and the story text and the reminders and the shenanigans. And you take actions, and then it says, if you do this, go to page whatever.
Right.
You do this, go to page whatever, and it's a choose your own adventure. Mm-hmm. And they don't have to reuse the same
board pieces
every time.
Yep.
How ingenious is that?
It's amazing. Like,
how angry are you that you didn't think of it first? Because I'm a
mad.
little angry. Because I would have loved to have sold that to somebody.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Especially after having played Mice and Mystics and Time Stories, which I know you're not a fan of.
Yeah, that's just me. But
they do a similar mechanic where they change the board, but you had the board, and the board changes with the cards that come in each expansion pack.
Awesome.
So it's the same kind of structure, just
yeah.
Just this is sleeker. This has a lot more potential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you buy this one game.
Yeah.
And then down the road, they just print out another book.
Yep.
And it's a spiral-bound book. We're not talking where they even have to... because spiral-bound books are cheaper than fully-bound books.
Yep.
A little bit, at least.
Well, and it would have to be. I mean, it's cool because spiral-bound, you can lay it flat and you can play with it.
Correct, and that's the point.
So, exactly.
We're going to have Jerry Hawthorne from Plaid Hat Games on the show next week. Not next week. The week after, because next week is video games. You guys know the drill. You know what I meant. You probably would have corrected me in the community anyway. It's going to be $60. It's coming out in time for the holidays. I'm hoping, beyond hope, that they will send me maybe a little pre-release copy so that I can get some reviews up, because I would love to help people out with this one. Also, I'm pretty sure it's going to be great. There are four... what's crazy about this is there are 4 different stories. Each of them have multiple endings, all in that one book.
That's awesome.
This is super great. And what's crazy about this is they could do this for all of their Plaid Hat games. Could you imagine a Dead of Winter game set in that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can, right?
Yeah.
Can you think... clearly, Mice and Mystics fits in that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I want to see a Stuffed Fables Mice and Mystics crossover.
That would be awesome.
And then cross it over with something anime, too, just to make it completely absurd. This is one of those things that I have a feeling... Because I don't think you can... Can you patent the idea of using a book as a game board? I wonder. Because if you can't patent that, then everybody's putting one of these out at Gen Con next year.
I talked to, I can't remember his name, the guy who designed Ticket to Ride.
Okay.
I met him a long time ago, before I started the podcast. I met him at a Geek and Sundry event in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And my friend who I was with and his daughter had designed their own board game, a potions board game, after having read Harry Potter and being so disappointed with the games that came out of Harry Potter, which I know have gotten better. This was, like I said, like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my friend asked him, he's like, well, we're, leery of game testing because somebody might steal the game from us. And he's like, there's a pretty strong code of ethics among game designers where they don't steal from each other. However, there is no way to copyright your game design. He's like, you can copyright your entire game, but you cannot copyright the mechanics of your game. So that's just one of those things where, yes, somebody else is going to see this and is going to do it. So, which I don't think is a bad thing, but it's just, it's not something you can nail down.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of these next year at Gen Con, I would think.
Yeah, I think so, too.
But that's okay, because Plaid Hat's got a bit of a head start.
If they took the Star Wars one, and they did this kind of a setup for the Star Wars one, now that would get your casuals.
Dungeons & Dragons could do this, too.
Dungeons & Dragons could do this. They could all do it. It would be fantastic.
Dungeons & Dragons could do this for literal Dungeons & Dragons adventures.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, literal Dungeons & Dragons adventures.
Yeah.
Here's your map, son.
Yes.
Anyway, so,
Yes.
man, it's cool. If you are interested, and the last 2 weeks worth of content, coming upwards on 3 weeks of content once I have Jerry Hawthorne on the show to interview, head on over to Plaid Hat Games. That is Plaid, like Plaid Hat Games. And take a look at it. Man, does it look cool. These miniatures, some of them are a little creepy. It's got a Toy Story vibe to me. Toy Story Cross Nightmare Before Christmas vibe, which is totally fine. Very excited about that. Obviously, there were dozens upon dozens of other games that were announced and released at Gen Con. But these are the big ones that I wanted to talk about here. Regina, were there any that you saw in your travels other than these that you thought
No, I think
were
you pretty
worth
much
discussing?
hit the top of the ones. I do want to give a shout out to a friend's game.
Okay, sure.
I know someone who does Kickstarter games and runs Kickstarters professionally, Simon Berman. He is working on The Art of Chill, which was debuted at Gen Con. Have you seen any pictures of this? The Art of Chill?
No, let's go look. When does it go on Kickstarter?
I'm not sure. It might already be
Let's
there.
look.
Oh, wait, that's not it.
The Art of Chill is an album.
It is. It's not called. I have to see if I can find it. Let me go to Simon's page because I know it was on there. Because he was at Gen Con promoting it.
What was it? What's his page?
His is Strix Publishing, STRIX. But I'm not sure it's there because I think he got hired out to do this one. Sorry.
Well, he did Apocrypha.
Yes. He does a lot of, there we go. Oh, Bob Ross, The Art of Chill game.
Oh, Bob Ross, The Art of Chill.
Yes, it's Bob Ross. And I saw some pictures on a site I pulled up that I didn't.
No, the Bob Ross game, so it's bobrossgame.com.
Okay.
And I think that's going to be a Target exclusive.
Is it?
Yeah, that you can pre-order right now. Let's see when it comes out. I remember seeing this and wanting to buy it.
Yeah.
It's $25. I mean, I'm definitely going to buy it for $25.
For $25 for just for the Bob Ross kitsch factor. But anyway, so he's working on probably it must be doing the PR for this game. And so anyway, I just wanted to give a shout out for it because Bob Ross.
Oh yeah.
And it's
awesome.
It's
Bob Ross.
Yeah.
Age 12 and up, $25, coming to Target. When, good sir, are you coming out? Let's see
and
if
it's
it
a
tells
short
me.
game.
Releases on 9/15, so that's less than 3 weeks.
So right
not a Kickstarter thing that we got to deal with. This is coming to Target.
Yeah.
So yeah, head on over to Target on 9/15 and pick up Chillin' with Bob Ross.
Yes.
I'm buying this, and so you can look for pictures of it on the Instagram.
Yep.
So, Regina, it has been a pleasure.
Yes, it has been. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
I suspect that we will do this quite frequently whenever Nicole cancels on us on Wednesdays. So let's just plan on that.
So
Everybody that's listening, Regina and I would like to thank you for listening today to Engage, a family gaming podcast. We hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed recording. We'll be back next week. Specifically, I'll be here talking about video games, probably with the General, because this week is Gamescom in Cologne, Germany, and man, are there so many of the video game announcements. Interesting spoiler, didn't get a chance to talk about this on Gaming with the Moms this week, because Gaming with the Moms this week didn't happen. I secured an SNES Classic pre-order.
Whoa.
You know why? Because my girl at GameStop came through for me.
Nice.
I love her. Not like in a creepy way love her, but I absolutely love her.
Like, yeah. She helps
because she is my bestie.
Yes.
And so we will be talking about some of those shenanigans. We'll be giving some advice on how to get an SNES Classic as we get closer to release day. And we'll be talking about some of the news. How about a mobile version of Final Fantasy 15? Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition. We'll be talking all about that.
That will be right up my alley.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Look up the
game
art, because it's super chibi.
Yeah.
Because they changed the art style. It's super chibi. So yes, Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition. And we're going to be talking about all the other stuff coming out of Gamescom. But in the meantime, folks, it's still board game week. So enjoy yourself some board games. But while you're doing so, if you don't mind grabbing your phone, heading on over to iTunes and leaving us a review, I would absolutely love you forever if you left us a review. We might even read it on the air if it's good.
You should read them if they're bad, too.
Yeah, I probably will, just because they might be hilariously bad. So, until next week, this is Steven and Regina. We're reminding you to get your family game on. We'll see you next week, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Engage, a family gaming podcast.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. Tune in next week.